Hello and welcome to the CX Files for November 27th, 2025. My name is Mark Hillary and I'm in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
And I'm Peter Ryan. I am in Munich today, Mark, where I'm visiting the Christmas markets and having a great time doing so. Always happy to get back to one of my favorite cities in the world, Munich, Germany.
Yeah, it's always great. I was over in Munich fairly recently for the Oktoberfest, and it's just impressive. I mean, how many people they can pack into that place, and there's multiple venues. It's as if you're inside an arena-sized venue with everybody drinking beer, and then you look around, and there's just other huge arenas all over the place as well.
Very much so, very much so. And when it comes to event management, Germany does it exceptionally well. Munich does it exceptionally well. And, it's an interesting one because, as you know, this is where we held the last CX Outsourcers annual Mindshare. I've been visiting Munich now for several years. I try to get back 2, 3 times a year. It's very much one of my happy places in the world where you can just relax, you can just enjoy yourself. There's always something to do, there's always something new to check out. And on to the pod this week, we have got an exceptional guest in the form of Nick Jiwa. Mark, have you met him before?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Okay, Nick is somebody who I've been connected with for years. He is the founder and president of CustomerServ. He's based in the States, and I've always liked the fact that Nick has got very provocative content. He's not somebody that's a cut and paster. He comes up with articles, he comes up with commentary on LinkedIn that is very authentic, very genuine, and it's not run-of-the-mill stuff. He's not afraid to be provocative. Now, he had posted an article a few months ago that I thought bore out the reality of our industry. And it really, I think, touched a nerve for me because what he was talking about in this article was the fact that our industry, the CX space, is still very much a people business. And he went through a very long, I guess you could say, prosecution of the case that he was trying to make. And it was one of the best things I'd read all year on LinkedIn. So I reached out to Nick and I said, listen, what you're saying really is hitting home for me. I would love to get you on the CX Files to have a little chat about your points of view and to unpack some of the things that you put in. And he was very amenable to it. So we had a really, really nice discussion. And I think that some of the key points that Nick has teased out in his article, Mark, as well as the chat that we had on the CX Files, are topics that a lot of people in our industry are bringing to the forefront, or they're chatting about with each other, but aren't necessarily getting the same resonance or the same level of visibility on networks like LinkedIn or at conferences for whatever reason. But Nick's entire case about the article and his point of view is that we cannot undermine the fact that whether anybody likes it or not, that humans are still going to be at the epicenter of how CX is going to be delivered. Now, obviously, this dynamic is going to change. This dynamic is going to evolve. Everything evolves. Every industry evolves. But Nick's really, I think, brought us back to more of a reality check and I would say a very solid center grounding about our industry and what it's all about. One of the best encapsulations I've seen probably in the last 2 or 3 years.
That's excellent. Yeah, I mean, I was having a similar discussion a couple of weeks ago in the pub in London with William Carson from Ascensos, just talking about there's so many changes. We're being buffeted from all sides with technological change and political change, societal change, and everything affects customer service because here we're talking about how do customers interact with the companies that they buy from. So all of this changes the way that consumers behave, and yet at the end of the day, we're still talking about a relationship between the company that's selling a product and people. So no matter how much you introduce automation technology, you're still going to need to manage that relationship, and I think that's what's important here.
I agree. And I think that this is one of the big tenets that Nick had brought out in the course of his article and during the course of our discussion. One of the comments I made to Nick during the course of the chat that everybody will be able to hear in a few minutes is the fact that all these so-called, how would I say it, clairvoyants or soothsayers of what's going to happen from a CX technology standpoint. The same people that 2 or 3 years ago were saying that there'll be no more contact center agents by 2025 or 2026 are now the ones who are trying to make themselves appear relevant and appear intelligent by posting articles on LinkedIn or commentary on LinkedIn by saying AI is not going to end the contact center agent, it's going to enable the contact center agent. And it just seems that the narrative is continuously evolving as the technology evolves. But there's so much white noise out there, there's so much propaganda out there. We need people like Nick to draw us back into, I think, a point of realistic, pragmatic discussion. And that's exactly what he did over the course of the interview.
All right. Well, why don't we go straight to that interview? I mean, obviously, it kind of opens a can of worms because we could also talk about the investment in AI, that research that everybody's making. Clearly, we need to find a real business use case for the companies that are investing trillions of dollars in this. But clearly, it might happen in a couple of decades, but it's not going to happen by next year, is it?
No, no, exactly.
So why don't we go straight to that discussion and let's see what Nick had to say.
Well, this week on the CX Files, we are absolutely delighted to welcome Nick Jiwa, who is the president and founder of CustomerServ. He's joining us from his home base in one of my favorite cities in the world, Houston, Texas. Nick, great to catch up with you. Thanks for joining the CX Files today.
Peter, likewise. First of all, thank you for having me on the CX Files. And thank you for your hard work in our industry. It's much appreciated. And I love your Friday polls.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words. The polls will be continuing. It's an interesting one, Nick, because as both you and I are roughly the same age, we were bantering a bit before we hit the record button. We both grew up in the 80s or had maybe our formative years in the 80s. I've been running that Friday poll now for coming up to 5 years. So that means over 250 polls. Coming up with new subjects should be challenging, but anybody who had their formative years in that decade knows it was so rich, it was so vibrant, and there's just so much to choose from. So for the time being, the Friday polls will continue, and we appreciate your feedback, your inputs, your votes, and your commentary around them.
I'm an 80s kid. One day I'll share a photo with you of my 1980s Nick Jiwa, big mullet, earring. I could have been an extra in a Duran Duran video.
Who's to say you weren't? What aren't you telling us, Nick? What aren't you telling us?
I wish I was.
Well, Nick, you and I were chatting about your background in the industry, and I think it's safe to say that anybody who's anyone in the CX space knows who you are. And I was really excited to catch up with you because not long ago you penned a superb article, one of the best ones I've read on LinkedIn, a little bit about how the CX space is fundamentally a people business. This is music to my ears. You know, for so long, I'd say the past 2.5, 3 years, we've literally been inundated with tech when it comes to customer experience management. And that's really only telling part of the story. But at the baseline of what we do, at the baseline of what consumers are looking for, it's human interaction. Can you give me a little bit of a background? What prompted you to write this article, which I would recommend everybody goes to your LinkedIn page to find and read?
Well, Peter, I wrote the article for many reasons. When I write content, I love to take a pulse of the industry. I love to lean in, listen to leaders, CX leaders, BPO leaders. The consultancy sphere. I like listening and leaning in and taking feedback because, look, I have as you said, many years of experience, and I have my views, and I see trend lines. But I want to compare and contrast with what leaders like you are seeing and what other leaders are seeing. And then I really want to focus on subjects that, we don't talk about enough, to be honest with you. There are lots, there's so much content out there about improving CX and the latest AI technology, and I think these are all very important topics. But I like to, I guess some people have referred to me as the Seinfeldian, content creator who likes to just talk about subjects that people aren't really focusing on, and for many who read my content, yeah, they, most of the folks who read my content, learn something, and that's my objective. I want to share, I want to educate, and so I wrote this piece for many, many reasons, which we'll get to throughout this podcast.
Okay, now, Nick, there was one point within the scope of the piece that really jumped out at me, and that is the fact that there are so many large, let's say, global BPO players that seem to try and want to reinvent themselves as tech giants. And I think that you made the reference, they're trying to say we're the next Microsoft or we're the new Google. This is clearly something that I think a lot of people are picking up on in our sector. Can you tell me, why do you think that this is a mistake?
Well, um, I have a couple of perspectives on this. Okay, many large BPOs are trying to reimagine themselves, and that's fine. But if you're going to transform into a tech company, then you cannot treat what's left of your call center BPO service as a sideshow, right? Many of our clients have received this treatment, and they've moved their BPO work to organizations that prioritize call center outsourcing as a service. Now, Peter, it may or may not be a mistake for larger BPOs to remake themselves, because many of them are being forced to find alternative revenue streams. Many are PE owned or publicly traded, and they have unique margin pressures that smaller and medium-sized BPOs generally don't have. And for these behemoth BPOs, traditional call center outsourcing may not be producing the same market value or margins as diversified tech services, such as anything AI or digital transformation or managed services or even IT engineering. And to shareholders and stockholders, call center 101 outsourcing alone, it may not be as sexy as technology as a service. So, I also think it's important to point something out that's very, very important. Larger BPOs have been distancing themselves from identifying as a BPO call center company for years. I mean, they've been rebranding as managed services companies or customer engagement companies. So this rebranding thing isn't new. And now with the AI revolution, the BPO makeover will continue. We're going to start seeing even more clever nomenclature in terms of how BPOs are creating new identities for themselves, right? And the buyer reaction to this is mixed. On the one hand, buyers are generally open-minded to service providers who successfully pivot and diversify. However, as you said, not all buyers are shopping for a standalone tech stack from their BPOs, right? Most buyers of call center outsourcing still want call center 101. Yeah. High quality and well-trained agents and experienced frontline leaders and the right outsourcing geographies. They want high echelon BPO services, which are supported by the BPO's innovative tech tools. But so many BPOs are leading in with tech, or they're leading in with BPO services, followed by a bait and switch to selling the client a tech stack, right? And what we find in our analysis is that either way, many of these outsourcers that are trying to be all things to all people, they're having an identity crisis, and they're struggling with call center operations, and they're causing buyers to explore other options.
Nick, I'll tell you, it's interesting because I'm long enough in the tooth in this industry to remember a lot of attempts of larger BPOs, especially, to pivot or to rebrand. We're now going to be doing this, and we're now going to be doing this type of value add work. But look, at the end of the day, I still maintain to a very large nth degree that if I'm a buyer of a particular service that doesn't necessarily fall into the CX space, it's highly unlikely I'm going to go to an outsourcer that's known for customer experience management to take care of HR or to take care of procurement or to take care of higher value add type service. And I'm not running anybody down for making the attempts. I think you're right. Businesses have to evolve. But again, some of us are old enough to remember when McDonald's tried pizza back in the early 1990s. And I think we can admit the pizza was superb, but there's a reason they're not doing pizza anymore because the customer didn't go to McDonald's to get a slice of pizza. They went for hamburgers and milkshakes.
100% right. Peter, I think it's important to address, go back to the question you asked about the article and why what prompted me to produce this piece. And this ties into what you just said. I don't think people realize this, but we are an industry founded by people for people. I know that sounds simplistic, but if you think about it, that's who and what we are, right? The genesis of call center outsourcing occurred in the 1970s. We were always designed to be a people-centric community supported by technology. And while technology has matured over the years, people have always remained at the heart and soul of call centers and CX, right? But, recently it feels like, many organizations are prioritizing tech and other initiatives over people, over culture, over talent development. And look, our industry provides unlimited opportunity for a career path, and we have got to get refocused on this. Many of us, including myself, maybe you, started out as call center agents, a part-time job. Yeah. For me, it turned into a 4-decade amazing career. My journey has been phenomenal. I come from humble beginnings. I'll never forget my mentors. I'll never forget the skills I learned working in a call center, because people are the most valuable asset in any BPO operations. And to those BPOs who remain people-centric, I say bravo to you, right?
Yeah.
Look, we're still an evolving industry, and we embrace new ideas and new innovations, but there's a growing sense that, as you said, too many organizations just don't do the basics right anymore. They're forgetting call center 101 daily blocking and tackling. They have an identity crisis. They're not culturally aligned. And I'm sure we agree that the BPOs who put people first and they have progressive business practices, they know how to maintain a healthy balance between their commitment to people and culture, along with their investments in technology and innovation.
Talking about that people focus, Nick, it's interesting to me that I think you and I, we were chatting a little bit about this before we hit record, but I'll bring it up again, that since the launch of ChatGPT back in November 2022, there was a narrative that was polluting our industry for quite some time about how Gen AI was going to get rid of all the call center agents and it was all going to be done via robots. I mean, look, again, you and I can remember back in the early 2000s, all the discussion was how speech automated IVR was going to kill the call center. Didn't happen. Then it was going to be RPA a few years later, then intelligent automation and so forth. What I've noticed now is some of these so-called thought leaders around AI who were actively promoting this notion of Gen AI literally erasing workstations and contact centers the world over are now starting to evangelize, if I can use that word, the narrative of tech enabling humans and this whole notion of agentic AI, which is now become the buzzword of 2025. How much of this is real and how much of this is vaporware?
Great point. Great question. So the narrative is shifting because many of us have seen the light. Like, we're not buying into the hyperbolic sales pitches and proclamations calling for the end of human interaction in call centers. R2D2 didn't replace humans at the pace that they, the so-called experts, predicted. So now they're shifting the narrative to tech-enabled human support, which is, it's relevant, it's practical, it's theoretical. It's practical versus theoretical, right?
Yeah.
We keep hearing about theoretical this and theoretical that. Now, I really want to focus on this point because it's very important. AI is having a nice impact in agent assisted solutions, and many of our clients have successfully deployed various forms of AI to bolster self service. But I have yet to see a dramatic decline in contact volume, in live interaction, live agent interaction at the level it was predicted, right? And as AI helps to reduce transactional volume, what about the more emotional and complex interactions that will require a human touch? The pendulum is going to swing wildly toward high touch support, and smarter BPOs will need to upskill their agents if transactional and simpler contact types significantly decline. But that's still a big if, right? We're seeing this evolve. And despite the bold predictions, no one really knows how AI will shape the future of the call center industry. I mean, you said it yourself, you brought up a couple of great examples. Since the founding of our industry, experts made all sorts of predictions that never came to fruition. Do you remember when the experts said the internet was going to end the need for call centers? The internet, which was introduced when, in the early 1990s, or when the experts, I don't know if you remember this, but they predicted that live chat would end all voice interactions, right? None of this came to fruition. I think we all need to take a deep breath, tone down the hyperbole, tone down the bold predictions, and let's just see how things play out in the coming years, because our industry is projected to grow. And Peter, I just want to make two very important points here before I hand it back to you. In my article, I quote Grandview Research, which is a credible research organization among many that monitor the BPO industry, right? Mm-hmm. Today, they project that we're a $300 billion industry, but we're heading to $500 billion by 2030. Much of this growth is going to be fueled by a broader adoption of outsourcing, which means companies that are in-house today will start outsourcing call center and HR and F&A and back office and diversified services. So can you explain to me how, if we believe the experts who say that our industry is going to shrink, then how is it possible that these research companies are projecting dramatic growth if we believe that there will be an end to human interaction in call centers? The predictions and the trajectory of growth are incongruent, right? We're a resilient industry, and I'll say this and hand it back to you. I used to joke a lot that if the meteor ever hit the earth, two things will survive. We know cockroaches will survive, and so will call centers. We're a resilient industry. We've been through a lot. We've overcome so much. And I will tell you this right now. The consumer will ultimately determine the future of live human interaction. It's not going to be AI companies. The consumer will decide for us.
And I think that's a really, really good way of putting it. By the way, I've never heard cockroaches and call centers mentioned on a podcast before. So congratulations, Nick. You're getting the gold medal on that one. You're probably not wrong either.
People can misinterpret that, and I don't mean to be a misinterpretation. I'm just joking that we'll survive a meteor hit.
No, exactly. It is a very resilient industry, and as you mentioned, it's a people-first industry. I remember there was a fantastic commercial that ANZ Bank did. This is going back over 20 years now, out of Australia, and they had the call center of the future on, and it was literally imagine every campy, cheesy robot from every sci-fi TV show and movie from the 60s and 70s trying to answer calls, like the one on Doctor Who. Remember the one with the plunger as its hand? And it's classic. And at the end of it, they indicated in a message, you will always get a human at the ANZ call center. Now, I think that as we steer the discussion for the podcast back to the human factor and what's going on human-wise in the contact center, Nick, you raised some really good points about the fact that we're really a people-focused business. Like, that's just the way it comes down to. So given the fact that we've had to undergo or had to endure 3 years of, quite frankly, in many cases, nonsensical hype cycle that's been pervading, polluting LinkedIn amongst other channels, how do we steer this discussion back to a people-focused business, people serving people, agents serving consumers?
Yeah. Great question. I don't think it's difficult to get refocused back on people, because as I said, we were always meant to be a people-centric industry. Um, and I want to compliment our industry. I want to compliment leaders in our industry, because the one thing we're really good at is pivoting and adapting and changing, rapidly changing, right? That change defines our industry. Do you remember in your career 2 days in our industry that are exactly alike? Because I can't. There's so much dynamism in our industry, right? And there's so much change. And those of us who have been in it for so long and who stay in it and who love it, it's because it's in our DNA. And when we take vacations and when we are not in the action, we get withdrawal symptoms, because that's how dynamic our industry is. So, I don't think that it's too late. I think that we just need to get refocused on people, culture, leadership development, and the fundamentals of call center operations. We cannot abandon these critical areas that are the bedrock of successful CX. And it all starts with organizational self-awareness for brands and BPOs alike. As I mentioned earlier, too many organizations are dealing with an identity crisis. They need introspection. They need maybe an intervention. They need to clarify what kind of an organization they want to be, right? Again, this sounds so simplistic, but I speak to so many leaders on the CX side and their brands, and also on the BPO side and everybody in between. And a lot of people are going through this identity crisis. Like there's so much tech hysteria and so much information. They're having trouble kind of refocusing on who and what they are. And they're trying to reimagine themselves, right? If brands want the best CX delivery from their BPOs, stop chasing the lowest bidder. Okay? Educate your sourcing teams involved in BPO RFPs that the brand isn't buying widgets. You're buying a people-centric, complex service, right? Too many clients call for partnership, but they jump right to the pricing page of an RFP. And so if you want to partner, be a partner. Focus on how the BPO will carry the brand's mission and culture and values forward. Look to a partner with people-centric culture who will be your best brand ambassadors. Peter, some of our BPOs take NPS scores from their agents and leaders on a quarterly basis. We need more of this. I feel like the voice of the agent has become silenced because we're no longer listening to them. So it's very simple. Get back to that. Invite people in to do motivational speeches, do TED Talks, get refocused on human beings, the human touch, people. We're veering away from them. And I often advise our BPOs, and I even advise our brands, can't be all things to all people. Okay. Get refocused on the basics, stop overreaching, stop overextending, and just rethink that success formula that built your business in the first place.
On that note, Nick Jiwa, I am going to say a big thank you for the time that you've spent today with us on the CX Files. This has been a fascinating chat. It's your first one, but it certainly won't be your last appearance.
My pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you again for having me, and I look forward to doing it again.
Thanks for listening to the CX Files podcast. We really appreciate your feedback and suggestions. You can reach myself, Mark Hillary, or Peter Ryan via LinkedIn. Please also leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast provider, as that helps more people to find us. As always, we'd like to thank Chris Haig at Traction Media for the CX Files graphics. See you next week. Hello and welcome to the... Let's start again.